Nothing changes if nothing changes. That's it. That's the whole episode. That's the whole doctrine. You can listen to 1,000 podcasts. You can read 1,000 books. You can watch 1,000 videos. You can be inspired 1,000 times. But if you don't change anything, nothing changes. Motivation is temporary. Inspiration is temporary. But discipline is permanent. Discipline is what creates lasting change. So today, we are exploring what it means to actually change, not to be motivated to change, not to want to change, but to actually do the work required to change. Because nothing changes if nothing changes. Theo once said something that cuts through all the noise. Nothing changes if nothing changes. It's simple, it's direct, and it's undeniable. Most people want change without doing the work. They want to be fit without exercising. They want to be successful without working. They want to be disciplined without building systems. They want transformation without transformation. But that's not how it works. Change requires action, real, consistent, uncomfortable action. And here's the thing, most people know this deep down, they know what needs to change. They know they need to exercise. They know they need to eat better. They know they need to work harder. They know they need to build discipline. But knowing and doing are two different things. Knowing is easy. Knowing doesn't require anything from you. You can know and still stay the same. But doing requires sacrifice. Doing requires discipline. Doing requires you to become someone different. And most people aren't willing to do that. They are willing to want change. They are willing to talk about change. They are willing to be inspired by change, but they're not actually willing to act, to change. That's why nothing changes if nothing changes. Because change requires you to change, not your circumstances, not your environment, not your luck, you. So what needs to change? Everything. Your mindset, your habits, your environment, your standards, and your identity. Let's break this down. First, your mindset. Most men have a victim mentality. They believe their circumstances are beyond their control. They believe they're stuck. They believe change is impossible. But that's a lie. Change is always possible. You always have a choice. You always have power. The moment you accept responsibility for your life, everything changes. Not your circumstances, your power, your ability to change your circumstances. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Your mindset creates your reality. If you think you're stuck, you'll stay stuck. If you think you can change, you can change. So the first thing that needs to change is your mindset. You have to believe that change is possible. You have to believe that you have the power to change. Second, the habits. Your habits are your life. You are the sum of your daily habits. If your habits are weak, you are weak. If your habits are strong, you are strong. So, what habits need to change? The ones that are keeping you stuck, the ones that are preventing you from becoming who you are meant to be. Maybe it's sleeping in, maybe it's scrolling social media, maybe it's eating junk food, maybe it's avoiding work, maybe it's making excuses. Whatever it is, it needs to change. And it won't change because you want it to change. It will change because you discipline yourself to change it. Third, your environment. You are the average of the five people you spend the most time with. If you're surrounded by weak people, you'll be weak. If you're surrounded by strong people, you'll be strong. So your environment needs to change. You need to surround yourself with people who challenge you, people who inspire you, people who hold you accountable. This might mean leaving your current friend group. This might mean finding a new community. This might mean spending less time with people who don't support your growth. Fourth, your standards. Most men have low standards. They accept mediocrity. They accept failure. They accept weakness. But you need to raise your standards. Need to refuse mediocrity. Need to refuse failure. Need to refuse weakness. Your standards are your non negotiables. They are the line you won't cross. They are the person you refuse to be. If your standards are low, you'll stay low. If your standards are high, you'll stay high. Fifth, your identity. This is the most important one. You need to change your identity. You're not just someone who exercises, you're an athlete. You're not just someone who reads, you're a scholar. You're not just someone who works hard, you're a builder. Your identity is who you are at the core. And if your identity is weak, everything else will be weak. So you need to change your identity. You need to see yourself as the person you're meant to become. You need to embody that identity in every action that you take. That's what needs to change your mindset, your habits, your environment, the standards, and your identity. So, if change is this important, why don't most people change? Because change is hard, change is uncomfortable, change requires sacrifice. When you change, you have to give up who you were. You have to give up your old habits. You have to give up your old friends. You have to give up your old identity. And most people aren't willing to do that. Most people would rather stay in the same and be miserable than change and be uncomfortable. But here's the truth, you're going to be uncomfortable either way. You can be uncomfortable changing, or you can be uncomfortable staying the same, but you are going to be uncomfortable. The question is, which discomfort are you willing to endure? The discomfort of change is temporary. It lasts as long as it takes to build new habits. Usually a few weeks, usually a few months. But the discomfort of staying the same, is permanent. It lasts your entire life. So most people choose the permanent discomfort over the temporary discomfort. They choose to stay the same because the short term pain of change feels worse than the long term pain of stagnation. That's why nothing changes if nothing changes. Because most people aren't willing to endure the temporary discomfort required to change. But you are not, most people are listening to this, you're thinking about this, which means you're already willing to change. Here is the key difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation is how you feel, discipline is what you do. Motivation comes and goes. Some days you feel inspired, some days you don't. Some days you feel like working, some days you don't. But discipline doesn't care how you feel. Discipline is the commitment to do the work regardless of how you feel. That is why discipline beats motivation. Because motivation is unreliable, motivation is temporary, motivation will fail you. But discipline is reliable. Discipline is permanent. Discipline will never fail you. When you're building new habits, motivation gets you started, but discipline is what keeps you going. Motivation is the spark, discipline is the fire. Most people rely on motivation. They wait until they feel inspired to work. They wait until they feel motivated to exercise. They wait until they feel like changing. But that's backwards. You don't wait for motivation. You use discipline to create the conditions for motivation. You exercise even when you don't feel like it. And after a few weeks, you start to feel like exercising. You work even when you don't feel like it. And after a few weeks, you start to feel like working. You change even when you don't feel like it. And after a few weeks, you start to feel like changing. That's how discipline works. Discipline creates the conditions for motivation, not the other way around. So if you're waiting for motivation to change, you're going to wait forever. You need to use discipline to start changing. And once you start, motivation will follow. So how do you actually change? Here is the framework. Step one, acknowledge the truth. First, you have to acknowledge that nothing is going to change unless you change. You have to stop blaming your circumstances. You have to stop blaming other people. You have to accept responsibility for your life. This is the hardest step because it means admitting that you are the problem. But it's also the most powerful step because once you accept responsibility, you have power. Step two, define what needs to change. Second, you have to define exactly what needs to change, not vaguely, specifically. Don't say, I need to be healthier. Say, I need to exercise 30 minutes every morning and eat vegetables with every meal. Don't say, I need to be more successful. Say, I need to work on my business for 4 hours every day and read one business book per month. Don't say, I need to be more disciplined. Say, I need to wake up at 5 a.m., meditate for 10 minutes, and track my non negotiables every day. Specificity is power, vagueness is weakness. Step three, build the system. Third, you have to build a system to support the change. You can't rely on willpower. Willpower is temporary. You need a system. This is where your discipline tracker comes in. This is where your non negotiables come in. This is where your daily structure comes in. You need to build a system that makes the change automatic, a system that doesn't require willpower, a system that requires discipline. Step four. Fourth, you have to execute the system every single day. No excuses, no negotiation. This is where discipline comes in. This is where you do the work even when you don't feel like it. This is where you stay consistent. Step five, adjust and refine. Fifth, you have to adjust and refine the system as you go. What works for one person might not work for you. What works for one season might not work for for the next. So you have to be willing to adjust, but you have to do it with discipline, not with excuses. That's the framework. Acknowledge, define, build, execute, and adjust. Follow this framework, and nothing will stay the same. Let me give you some examples of men who changed. Steve Jobs, he could have stayed comfortably, but he changed. He left Apple, he went to India, found his purpose, he came back and changed the world. Dwayne, the Rock Johnson, he could have stayed comfortable, but he changed. He committed to working out 6 hours a day. He changed his diet, he changed his mindset, and he became one of the most successful actors in the world. Oprah Winfrey, she could have stayed comfortable, but she changed. She escaped poverty. She changed her mindset. She changed her environment. She changed her identity. And she became one of the most influential people in the world. The Apostle Paul, he was a persecutor of Christians. Could have stayed the same, but he changed. He had an encounter with Jesus. He changed his entire identity. He changed his entire life. And he became one of the greatest leaders in history. Maybe you don't know these famous examples. Think about the men in your own life who succeeded. They changed. They refused to stay the same. They did the work and they became who they were meant to be. All of these people had one thing in common. They changed. They didn't wait for the perfect moment. They didn't wait for motivation. They used discipline to change. And their lives transformed as a result. Here's what happens if you don't change. Nothing. Your life stays the same. The circumstances stay the same. Your results stay the same. But that's not really true. Your life doesn't stay the same. Your life gets worse because the world is changing. The world is moving forward. And if you're not changing with it, you're falling behind. So the cost of not changing isn't staying the same. The cost of not changing is falling behind. Cost of not changing is becoming irrelevant. The cost of not changing is dying before you've lived. And that's why nothing changes if nothing changes. Because if you don't change, everything gets worse. There's a verse in Second Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 that says, therefore, if is in Christ, the new creation has come. Old has gone, the new is here. That's transformation. That's change. That's becoming new. And the appointed time for your transformation is now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. Now, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And the only person who can change you is you. So, the question is, are you willing to change? Are you willing to change your mindset? Are you willing to change your habits? Are you willing to change your environment? Are you willing to change your standards? Are you willing to change your identity? Because if you are, everything changes. Your life changes, your results changes, your future changes. But it starts with you. It starts with discipline, starts with the commitment to do the work. That's the doctrine. That's the system. That's what separates the men who change from men who stay the same. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So change your mindset, change your habits, change your environment, change your standards, and change your identity. Use discipline, not motivation. Discipline and watch everything transform. That's the appointed time. That's the doctrine. Change. This is built, not felt by the rice code. I'll see you all in the next one.